back end as opposed to the front end because we, I'm pressed for time for sure. And I know others are because I'm a 1 hour guy in general, guys. So everybody knows this. We've already checked up a half of it. Um, so first of all, if you're recording already, the reason I want to call this is because all the work that you're doing right now in Dakar, which is to bring both the students of LA County and the community colleges involved with ideas about multimedia and being able to get in front of, behind, and within the cameras and the way to produce. And of course, Lou, you have this requirement also to provide content and other things. One of the most interesting things I have done in this past year was listen to Dr. Carl Mack's presentation of African American history. Now, everybody knows that one is I'm a big believer in what's called U3D, underserved, undervalued, underrepresented, and disenfranchised, and that mostly applies to Black and Brown people. But I also believe in the Carr model, often called the Venn diagram, but it has basically 5 parts. But the top of that piece is a person's ability to, first of all, recognize who they are and own their space, their ability to own their space. That is believing that they have roots and a future. The other parts of the Venn diagram talks about education, science, technology, engineering, math, and then takes them to the environment that they're in. That's what that does. But before you can really get involved, you got to know you can compete. What Dr. Carl Mack does better than anybody I've ever seen is in allocated time of about an hour plus, he presents 3 key parts of who African Americans are. He brings them into the context of where they are in a society. He lets them understand one that they are rooted in the foundation of who we are as a nation from every aspect. And because Dr. Carl Mack was and is an engineer, he has done something else very different. He presents even the case for reparations with mathematics, not subjective, nothing subjective in all of his presentation. Everything is very objective. And it makes for both his ability to present it as well as information so that if you are a child or an adult with children or an American that cares about where we go forward, you will be entertained. And if we can let some of these folks that you work with see, present, do provide his information as we just did in Kansas City with some other science things thrown in there, it is exceptionally powerful. I've got some couple of flyers that Kevin has, but we're gonna go ahead. You just add those at the end later, Kevin, and it will show you what we did in Kansas City in terms of an agenda, and it'll show you the kids that were involved in the production. But their production is nothing like what your kids in California can do in terms of framing it. The second part of what we have here with Lou on the line is Lou, you know how to go ahead and take something like this and advertise it so it has incredible reach. The last piece is my particular point of investment. One of the things that is highlighted is December 6th is the date that the 13th Amendment was ratified. I always talk about 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, and then, of course, the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and 1964, and then, of course, the ones that ratified. But the reality is that and there's a new movement to talk about Juneteenth. We got to be careful because one of the things that's highlighted in here is that Juneteenth is not a liberation day. It's a liberation for the South, of the blacks in the South. The 13th Amendment on December 6th ratified is a big deal. So I'm going to propose as part of this presentation, this is our kickoff to try to get folks to look at Equality and Freedom Day in America being December 6th, 1865. And we look for that and we're going to push for that. What we're going to try to do here, I want to replicate in multiple places. We're going to do it again in Kansas City, by the way, Carl, on the 20th of February. I would like to try to do this one in the early part of February to kick it off and hit other places. Carl also has a product that he shows that also is amplified as of what he does, and basically it's something of significance that occurs regarding people of color, African Americans, every single day of the year, and it's not minuscule like this guy was born. It is a capture of character, and again, everything is about digging into the root. Now, with that said, and because we're in time, I'm going to now go ahead and do two things. One is I'm going to give the floor back. I'm going to now give the floor to Carl so he can talk about his piece, what he wants, what he's doing, make a short introduction. Then we'll go ahead and do a quick round. And then Kevin, I'm gonna let you go ahead and do the closeout. Any questions or comments of me? Okay, Dr. Carl.
General, I'm not sure who's sharing the screen, but I'm gonna ask for the screen share.
Kevin's got
it. And General, thank you so much for the introduction, and gentlemen and ma'am, thank you so much for our meeting today. Am I good, Mr. Clark?
You're great. You sound great.
Okay. All right, so here we go. All right, what the general was sharing with you, and I'm gonna be as brief as I can, just on one component of this. All right, let me back up there. There's a little delay on my part. So back in when I started my engineering career, I worked with this white guy when I lived in Seattle by the name of Henry Cody. And Cody went to one of the Ivy League schools and became an engineer. But before he was an engineer, he really got off in history. And we came to work one day, and there was an article in the New York Times about Henry O. Flipper. And so Cody was talking to me about Flipper. And of course, we know that Henry O. Flipper is the first African-American graduate from the first engineering school in America, West Point. But the thing that was amazing is I had no idea who he was talking about. And I just realized inside of the framework of my education, which I think has 4 key components. There's a training component, there's a spiritual component, there's a financial component, and a cultural component. Well, I grew up going to church. Obviously, I got an engineering degree from Mississippi State, so training was okay. Financially, I came to understand, and I retired because of my management of money. But when it came to culture, I couldn't give you 100 words about the Black experience. And so I was given this by God to just say, hey, Carl, what if you just every day of the year could feature somebody out of African-American history? So in 1992, I published Black Heritage Day. And I printed 10,000 copies of it. And just through word of mouth in Seattle, I sold out. But people told me they didn't want to tear the pages off. So the next year, I made it spiral, and I did BHD 2 in 95. And then in 2000, I did BHD 3. And then now I just released Black Heritage Day 4. So the uniqueness of Black Heritage Day 4 than any of the other calendars, and this is the table of contents. So what you're going to see is all of these people are featured in Black Heritage Day 4, but this is only page 1 of the table of contents. That's the second page of the table of contents. That's the third page. And of course, that's the fourth page. So on every day of the year, what I was able to do that was pretty unique is that everybody that's featured is featured on a day significant in their life, not just a day out of African-American history. So when we talk about, and after the death of George Floyd, there was a lot of conversation about Juneteenth being a national holiday. And I got much respect for the efforts around Juneteenth, all of the celebrations about it. But from a historical perspective, it disturbed me that that would be the day that we would choose as, quote, Black Independence Day or Freedom Day. And so historically, as we all know, the Civil War, which was started on April 12th, 1861, when they fired on Fort Sumter, that war was fought directly over slavery. There is no ambiguity about that. It was fought over slavery. And the end of the Civil War at Appomattox was April 9th, 1865. Now, when the Civil War started, there were still Blacks that were enslaved. So you can't call that Freedom Day. When Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on September 22nd, which went into effect on January 1st, 1863, there were still blacks enslaved. On June 19th, 1865, when General Gordon Granger rode into Galveston, Texas, after the Civil War is over and still found blacks enslaved, people under their misunderstanding said these were the last blacks who were enslaved. So that's why they wanted to celebrate Juneteenth as this Black Freedom Day, when in fact, we know that at the end of the Civil War, there were still 5 border states that the Emancipation Proclamation did not apply to. We're talking about Maryland, Missouri, Delaware, West Virginia, and Kentucky. Now, in those states, slavery was still legal. So at the time that Juneteenth was rendered, June 19th, 1865, slavery was still legal in America. So you need 2 things to take place, at least 2 things to take place for a proposal to become an amendment. You got to have 2/3 of the Congress to approve it, and you got to have 3/4 of the states to ratify it. At the time, there were 35 states in the Union, which means that we needed 27 states to ratify that proposal, which ultimately became the 13th Amendment. And on December 6th, 1865, Georgia became the 27th state to ratify what became the 13th Amendment. And that is what abolished slavery. So at that point, if we are looking for a Black Freedom Day, I don't know historically what day could reign supreme over December 6th, 1865. I also like it from the standpoint that we talk about Black economic empowerment. Now, the day that I pushed before this, and that there is one day in the calendar that it's in there, but nothing happened on that day, and that's December 5th. So on December 5th of this calendar, I make my argument for reparations. And the reason I put December 5th, that's the only day, because I wanted to line it up with with December 6th. Because again, I want to put in the minds of African Americans that if we want to celebrate Freedom Day, if there's going to be a national holiday for it, December 6th, the day that slavery was abolished, and let that be a day that we only shop with Black-owned businesses. So there was a lot of pieces to it that made sense to me. And so this is a page from my calendar. So when the general spoke about it not just being a snippet of something, here's a typical page from the calendar when I talk about the 13th Amendment, just to give the reader some understanding of how that proposal became an amendment, when it became an amendment, and who was the 27th state to actually ratify it to bring it into that point. And I'm gonna jump out of here and I'll just go through and show you just some other pages. You know, here we see, and these are just sample pages from the calendar. This is Dr. Woodson, as many of us know. And so when the general talked about reparations, I'll maybe before I get to reparations, and let me move this around a little bit so I can see this. Here's another typical day within the framework of the calendar where I talk about the Declaration of Independence. Again, even when you're studying history, you're thinking about the Declaration of Independence from an American standpoint, not necessarily how it impacted African Americans. Well, what most people don't know is yes, most of us know that Jefferson wrote that original draft. Most of us are not aware that there was a passage that Jefferson put in the Declaration of Independence where he actually spoke against slavery. So there's a question that I normally would ask my audience, and that is that when Jefferson wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights." And when I say all men, did Jefferson mean Black folk? Most of us would say absolutely not, because Jefferson owned slaves. But that just speaks to his hypocrisy, not whether or not he meant all men. And I contend historically that he meant all men. So there's this omitted passage that was taken out of the Declaration of Independence where Jefferson clearly spoke against slavery. So again, this is one of the pages in the calendar that I do. And of course, what brought us to a lot of this was this issue with George Floyd. So the other thing that's unique, and again, every day of the calendar is specific to that day. So most of us will remember, well, we clearly remember the incident surrounding Mr. Floyd. Most of us may and may not remember the specific day, but it was May 25th of 2020. So I talk about George Floyd's death there, but I talk about it from the standpoint of what did his death mean to this nation? And his death, his murder, created the largest protest in the history of the country. Now, there was a lot of conversation about whether or not they should take down the Confederate statues, remove the Confederate flags, all of these types of things. So when I get to talking about African-American history, if you will, I get inside of what did, and that's where the teachings of the Civil War come in, where you have to understand what these people who were part of the South, the Confederacy, what did they say? So one of the speeches that I always go to is to say, look, I wasn't there in 1861, but if you go back there, there was a man who was there. He was Alexander Stephens. He was the vice president of the Confederacy. And Stephens wrote in his now infamous, if you will, cornerstone speech, exactly why the Civil War was fought. And he was very clear. He says the new Constitution has put at rest forever all the agitating questions relating to our peculiar institutions. African slavery, as it exists among us, the proper status of the Negro in our form of civilization. He goes on to say this was the immediate cause of the late rupture. Rupture meaning secession. Present revolution, that was the Civil War. This new Constitution that he talks about, he's talking about the Constitution of the Confederacy. So most people are not aware that, you know, they don't even think about the fact that these states, when they seceded and formed their new government, that they even had a constitution. But he's very clear. He goes on to say about this new government, and this is what I say to people who oppose the removal of the Confederate monuments. Stephens says, our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite ideas. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition. And this, our new government, this government of the Confederacy, this government by which we have these monuments erected. And normally when you put a statue or monument up, it's for honor. So unless you're just proud of the fact that one group of people enslaved another, they should come down. So that's part of it. And then I go into these letters of secession. What did Mississippi say? The state that I'm from. Mississippi says here, this paragraph, which I highlighted bigger, that the reason we're leaving the Union, our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery. The greatest material interest of the world is labor supplies to products that are peculiar to the climate, virginal, tropical regions, and only by the laws of nature. None but the Black race can bear exposure. But Mississippi goes on and says a little bit something else in here, and this speaks to my issue of reparations. In 1861, the state of Mississippi said this: utter subjugation awaits us in the Union if we should consent longer to remain in it. It's not a matter of choice, but this is of necessity. And we got to do one or two things. We're going to either submit to degradation, and if we do, it's going to be value to us, a loss of property worth $4 billion of money. Now, in 1861, who knew what $1 billion was? But the state of Mississippi clearly put a value on slavery. They said it was worth $4 billion. I go on and I do the same thing. I tell you what Georgia said. Georgia says, look, the reason we left is because of this. States interfering with the subject of slavery. Texas says it's about slavery. So it's very clear with that. Then I take the two constitutions and I compare them. Article 1, Section 2, Part 3. Our country, you'll never see in the Constitution, you'll never see the word slave. They always write it in an ambiguous way, 3/5 all of the persons. But if you want to know what they were talking about, all you got to do is look at the Constitution of the Confederacy, and they're very clear. Same language, everything is the same. And they simply say 3/5 all slaves. You look at Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. What do they say in Article 1, Section 9? The migration or importation. They were never talking about migration. They were speaking about importation of such persons. What such persons? And then for all of them that were imported, we're going to collect a tax of $10 for each person. Well, if you're not sure what they meant by such persons, go to the Constitution of the Confederacy, the exact same language, except they're very clear. It's just what Alexander Stephens says. There is no doubt about what we're fighting for: the importation of Negroes of the African race. So what was Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution talking about? slave trade. Now,
Dr. Carl, I'm gonna cut y'all because
Yeah.
I want you to save that twist because that's the piece that really I think look at after because if you I can see folks leaning forward already, but I'm gonna tell you when he finishes, it is nothing short of brilliant. So Dr. C, I'm asking just to hold them there because I want them. I think you all got a flavor for the presentation. Now the key is how do we take this and let the kids do the work around it and put it in the communities so that it informs. That's the key. That's where we're going. Dr. Carr, you know, I heard it multiple times, but I'm gonna tell you, each time I hear it, your enthusiasm still reigns in there. So I'm gonna, if getting off the subject now, is there anything that you'd like to share with this audience about the presentation in terms of preparation and things you'd like to see the additive or in a way for it to be produced?
no, not at all. One of the things I do is when I talk about African American history, I try not to be subjective. I want to be objective. And so that's why you'll see me present a lot of the historical documents so people can read for themselves and discern for themselves what they're looking at. But again, only a fool ignores history is what one great historian said. So even though I'm an engineer by trade, it was only when I learned history. I remember being at Mississippi State and I'm sitting in my thermodynamics class. I could barely spell thermodynamics. And I got students, white students, asking questions about the first and second law of enthalpy, something I had no exposure to. But I can only imagine that if as a child, I had been exposed to the greatness of my contributions to this country. If I had known about Henry O. Flipper and knew that when Henry O. Flipper was at West Point, nobody spoke with him, yet he graduated from one of the most academically challenging institutions in this country. If he could have graduated from West Point, most certainly I wouldn't have had those feelings of inferiority when I was at Mississippi State, trying to get.
And that's the statement that I talk about at the top of the dome. We go forward. So very quickly, Lou, if you can go ahead and let those who online don't know who you are, explain to them what you do, what you go, and what you bring to the fight.
You're on mute, Lou.
You know what? I should stay on mute. I really should because after listening to Carl, I have very little to contribute. You know what I guess the word is mesmerizing. No, I'm just I try to involve myself in organizations that I can help. I'm very involved in media, and involved with a lot of volunteer organizations and helping out the students in New York City, and and this is what I do. But boy, I think we should have taped you, or maybe I don't know if you have.
Oh, that you gonna get a whole lot more at the real deal. This is just so we all get you get a flavor for what he's going to do. But this is taped, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. So we're in the media. We're in the media together. Right now I work for Sinclair, but I work with all the media. I run a network. It's called a network. It's a network committee basically, and they're all involved. The 5 networks are there, and I advise them mostly on technology, but I have access to all of them, and they're all needing to figure things out. And this is I think that there's so much you can do here.
Thank you. Okay, Kevin, you are. In fact, I'll let you back clean up, Jeff, because I think I've heard you once before with Jeff Thompson.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Kevin, I'll take your lead as to how you want me to.
Yeah, well, and this is what I'll do is I'll kind of set these guys up. I know we're running short on time, but Jeff Thompson and I crossed paths through academia to workforce and digital media, cinema, TV, film. And literally he's been helping to frame how we get students to participate in doing all the heavy lifting, curating, developing, and really producing pieces of this puzzle that we can actually put into one portal or one place that will allow this to become interactive and really become evergreen. So Jeff, if you can talk a little bit about, maybe the James Brown project that you worked on, that could become a model for how we can take some of this content and make it more 360 as opposed to just one product.
Yeah, thank you for letting me join. And I joined and then I had to get off for a call and I've joined back. So I'm delighted I did. Dr. Carl, I got a good piece of what you were saying. Let me just add a couple of elements. One is I got my formative years as a vice president of the Walt Disney Company, a company that, global, but focused on really mainstream content, right? Our heritage was Snow White and Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella and really wonderful franchises, but quite frankly, franchises that did not involve people of color. I ended up helping launch something called The Princess and the Frog, which is the first African-American princess at Disney, and helped launch that globally and became Disney's first chief diversity officer, really focused on diversifying stories and right? So you can kind of get where I'm going. After I left Disney, I produced 4 projects. One was the James Brown channel. And that was, I guess, 7 years ago. The reason that's important is we don't spend enough time sharing all the successes that we've had, right? From a documentary point of view, from a narrative of how wonderful and rich our history has been. And for the most times, we've been locked out of the financing of this type of professional content, right? So that stories like ours have trouble getting funded to tell our stories. Well, that has been really flipped on its side now. We have the ability to tell our stories. We have enough educated population to help fund those stories and tell those stories in a way that showcases how rich, the rich heritage of what we've done for the society. And I'm just delighted to be able to help share that story. Just to let you know, I teach at USC. I'm an adjunct professor in the Annenberg School of Communications, and I focus on teaching students about the transformation to digital strategy and how powerful it is around the world to tell our stories and to tell diverse stories and unique stories that would have never found the day of light many years ago. So I'm just delighted to be here and happy to contribute.
Great. Dr. Carl, I want to introduce another gentleman I brought in, Dee Stevens. And Dee, again, has many skill sets in the area of storytelling and photography, but also is really activist in making sure that some of the things that we've learned, especially about history, is put into the permanent record. And where that permanent record is, no one knows. So Dee, can you introduce yourself?
Dee Stevens, a photojournalist, photographer, and writer, researcher. And he was talking about James Brown. I did the James Brown movie, the one that Tate did down in Mississippi. And I tell you, the research that went into that was pretty interesting. And then how it came out was very interesting. But again, we're not telling our own stories. Tate now is actually just finishing up a movie called Ava. I think it's streaming on Netflix.
I'm sorry, say the name of the movie.
Ava, AVA.
Yes.
Yes, and it's a powerful movie, very powerful movie. But it's just interesting. Steve Blochter was a cinematographer, brilliant guy, worked with him several times. And he did the James Brown movie. Then I did a movie like 42 about Jackie Robinson. So we did that. They issued out, I think, 15 posters on that movie, peppered all over the city. When Disney came along, I had an interesting story about Disney. When I did a movie called What's Love Got to Do with It? And I shot key art on that. And they came out with an ethnic poster of Angela being kissed by Lawrence on stage. And all of a sudden, Wild Water, they had the A-list poster, was everywhere. That was a graphic, this lines of what would have been Tina, with her nose pitched up very much like a white princess. But Wild Water were requesting the ethnic poster, which was the powerful picture of Lawrence on stage kissing Angie. Just was an amazing thing. But it's like, I really enjoy what the brother just said. I really enjoy it. I want to take that and digest it and actually incorporate that in my whole mental thing about, the Freedom Day, what's going on, and how we need to dictate our own stories. Because I go back always to Malcolm and looking at the history of things, and we have to start from there. We don't need to start from whatever well, how do you say, whatever criteria that they want us to start at. You know, we don't start from their level. We take it to ours. Like when Malcolm said, you know, his story is history is his story. Whoever tells the story, it's going to be his story. So when I did a movie, another movie I did was called Baseball in Black and White. It later changed the name for HBO to Soul of the Game. We had Delroy Lindo, we had Blair Underwood, we had some, and I got in a big fight with HBO. HBO asked me to shoot the guys from New York sent out comps, which what you shoot from to, you know, for key art. And he says, we need all the fellows, in Dodger uniforms. I said, I can't shoot that. And Delroy looked at me like, you must be crazy, because they were all Dodgers, they were, and Satchel Paige, which was Delroy's role, was rightfully supposed to be in the center. And man, I mean, they thought I was the troublemaker. So
Right.
Brothers really pulled me over one day and to the trailer, said, come on here, we got to talk to D. So Blair was there, Delroy was there. He says, look at these comps they're sending us, and their drawings, to the nth degree, the shadow details, everything is there. And they said, that was your idea. I said, I don't draw. I've never seen it. So it wasn't my idea. This is what the concept was in New York, at HBO headquarters. And so, but we got to tell our story because they will tell our story. And so I just enjoyed the information the brother was giving. Oh, I'm going to study that, man, because a lot of things I didn't know. That little bit he was telling me, I was like, some good things came down. I want to thank you, Kevin. This is a nice little thing you put on.
Well, yeah. Well, and again, with the time we have remaining, this is just the beginning, Dr. Carl. Real quick, I met General Bray through the struggle to get a film project that I was a producer on. The film project was called For Love of Liberty. It won an NAACP Image Award in 2011, Producers Guild Award. But that was a struggle in of itself because that story would have never been told and never published and broadcast on PBS without General Bray's assistance, that Secretary of Army hear this. And so we've been working together ever since to try to figure out how to do the sequel to the For Love of Liberty, or maybe the prequel.
Yeah.
And my background, I'm a community activist. I call myself a community transactionist because I really want to make sure people of color, especially young people, get their first chance, their first opportunity to participate with anything that becomes an institution. So anything, whether it be a documentary, a museum installation, there's not enough young people who get access to that stuff at the very earliest age. So I'm working with the California community colleges as well as the California states, but the California community colleges roughly because that's where General Bray introducing this term throwaway kids, where a lot of people have not been able to get an education, a 4-year education, or don't even have the means to understand what they have to do to try and get access to resources, internships, and even a living wage. So I'm trying to work right now with the community colleges to try and bring them up to an awareness that there are people who are mentors, and everything I do is undergirded by mentorship, will allow some of these exchanges to happen at a project level. So we're trying to find projects that we can have these students work on so they can work with Jeff and they can work with D. We have USC and UCLA on the line. And literally from a Southern California perspective, this is a place where a lot of media distribution and the business of media takes place. So it's a place where a lot of HBCU students are kind of coming out here for their summer internships. And we're definitely liking to try to leverage what Hollywood, what the entertainment industry can do to help make these stories more compelling to a global audience. So again, we're not really looking at just telling a story. We're looking at trying to make sure these stories become as global as they can be.
So,
And that's
so
the high
Clark,
standard.
yeah, let me add this. And first of all, I'm so proud of all of you, man. I'm Jeffrey, I'm sorry, my brother, I can't see your name on there.
Lee Stevens.
Brother Stevens, I'm so proud of all of you all for the work. And so as you're talking, I remember when I first did the first calendar and I'm learning about these incredible people. And I'm thinking to myself, you could take any one of these stories and make a movie out of it. And I remember specifically when I learned about the 54th and 55th Massachusetts Negro Regiment. Well, obviously they made the movie Glory about it. So when I'm listening to you all say, they tell the story from their perspective. what bothered me, the only thing that bothered me about that movie was that they clearly told you who the commander was, fictionally and historically. Robert Shaw, Colonel Shaw, they showed you that. But the man that I believe that played the part of Morgan Freeman, he would have been William Carney, who was one of the first Blacks to win a Congressional Medal of Honor, but they didn't call him by his name, Carney, but they certainly called Shaw by his name. So again, when I'm listening to you all saying how they, we can't leave it to other folks to tell our story, that was one of the things that was coming to mind as I was hearing you all talk. But again, I'm just humbled to be in the midst of such work. And before I started doing this, and I actually retired now, but I used to be the executive director for the National Society of Black Engineers, and that's where I met General Bray. And then prior to that, when I was in Seattle, I was president of the Seattle-King County NAACP, and we were presented with the Class 1A Thalheimer Award as the best branch in the country by the late Julian Bond. So that's kind of a little background on my civil rights and engineering perspective. But I'm so humbled to be amongst you all, and congratulations on tremendous bodies of work. Thank you all so much.
Well, gentlemen, again, I have another meeting Monday. I don't know if anybody can make it, but a brother named Jay Tucker, he's over at UCLA's Anderson School of Business, which is really focused on entertainment, sports, and media. He wanted to kind of do more of a stakeholders management of looking and focusing on one project so that we can look at trying to get either pieces or vignettes of a story that would really translate into a longer evergreen project that could all make us publishers of these small to large stories. And so what I want to do is invite all of you guys back. I'll send out an invite this time without having any technical problems for a follow-up to this call to talk about what can we focus on for Black History Month this year. And literally what we have, because of COVID and everybody sequestered or quarantined, we have now access to a lot of email addresses and people who are somewhat captive, and we can get to them in a way where we can go one to many or many to many and be able to have interaction with them so that we can actually start to take the exchange and the energy and make this something that has a longer tail.
Yeah.
So aside from one day or one-off event, I would like to try and create a fact-based Black history timeline.
Yeah. So speaking of that, it's something that I can certainly use some help from all of you on. And so again, this is the calendar. And so every day of the calendar is somebody from Black history, but they're featured on their specific day. And so one of my former students that used to work with me when I was in engineering is now at the Google Foundation. So I sent him a copy of the calendar just to kind of get his thoughts on it, because he grew up with me on doing these. And so there was an interesting opportunity that came to me. So Google saw the pages of the calendar. I guess he forwarded to some of the folks in Google, and they contacted me about licensing my content because they want to use it in their Google Assistant. So now if you say, Google, what happened on this day in history, then they tell you what happened on this day in history. But they're specific. They want to know what happened on this day in Black history. So they have been scouring all over the place looking for such content, but they couldn't find it. And so again, what's unique about Black Heritage Day 4 is that everybody is on a day significant to their life. I'm not quite sure I know how to deal with that particular opportunity. So Brother Jeffrey, if literally all of you could give me some insight on how to approach that, I'd certainly be grateful.
Happy to talk. How do you get the calendar, by the way? How, you sell it now? How do you distribute it currently?
Yeah, so I literally have been in a war with my printer. And so now I have so I printed 10,000 of them that are coming. So I got 1,000 of them that's going to be at the house. And I have an online site where, I can give you that site and you can get the calendar. But now ultimately what Google wants to do is for the month of February, the contents of Black Heritage Day is what they want to use for the Google Assistant. And they wanted to use my voice to actually read it versus using the assistant. And so at that point, I would get attributions of it and then people can go find it. But, you know, if something like that happens, I certainly can't be fulfilling calendars from my house. You know, obviously I got to try to find a fulfillment center. I've been working to find printers that can, you know, print if I get a big volume of it. But again, just that whole opportunity is enormous for it. You know, it potentially could be enormous. So I could certainly use some insight.
Wow.
Happy to give it on my side.
Yeah. Well, and Dr. Carl, if you can leave with us, I know General Bray has all your contact information. Can you put into the chat box just where your website is? So we
Okay,
can,
I will do that.
you know, grab that and take a look at what you have. The thing that comes to mind is, what did you plan on doing for Black History Month? Yourself as an individual, or for a one-off event to try to launch awareness about your project?
Quite frankly, I've enjoyed being retired and just trying to be a father to my two boys, because when I was executive director, I was on the road all the time. So I've enjoyed that, and really didn't plan on doing this another edition of the calendar, but it came about. So if somebody called me and said, "Hey, Carl, can you do a presentation?" So similar to the information that I shared with you earlier, you know, somebody calls me and says, "Hey, can you do a Black History presentation?" Nothing warms my heart more than trying to educate us about who we are. So I'm open to whatever happens. If nothing happens, I'm gonna hang out with my boys. If something happens, it's cool in the game.
Hey, can I add one piece that could be interesting? And I'll just say it, and it has nothing to do with the topic at hand. It has something to do with creating the supply of minds of young Black and people of color, and even, you know, just people across the cultural spectrum that find our stories interesting. And I'll just say it this way. We did research when I was at Disney on, you know, on kids and girls in particular, and the kinds of dolls that they wanted, right? Partly because we were working on starting our new first African-American princess. It wasn't surprising that young white girls typically go to young white dolls because that's what they've been exposed to. The travesty was that most African-American young girls, because they've been exposed mainly to certain types of cultures, when they saw a Black doll, they weren't as attracted to the Black doll. And that's, you know, if you ask the question, like right here, you know, I see a bunch of people, and we're different races in some cases, but we're concerned and happy to promote something that we have gotten some expertise on. And it's how do we get other people excited about these things? And not that, for God's sakes, not that, you know, Robert Shaw didn't do the great thing,
Right.
but it's that those other folks did it great things too, and they're just as legitimate and just as wonderful. And so anyway, I'm going to stop there because I know I'm preaching.
Well, that's okay. But Jeffrey, let me tell you why I was smiling so much, because on May 17th, that's the landmark day of Brown versus Board of Education. In the calendar, I featured Kenneth and Mamie Bancroft Clark. What you may or may not know about them is their research as psychologists was absolutely instrumental in that landmark case of Brown versus Board of Education. Their research was on what you just spoke about. It was the famous doll test, where they put dolls in front of Black girls and white girls, Black boys and white, you know, put dolls in front of children. And to your point, all of the negative connotations, and one of the Supreme Court Justice Harlan actually referenced that doll study in his ruling in that landmark case. So on May 17th, exactly.
I want one of those calendars, and I'm happy to pay for it. So please.
Well, I put the website up there. And so what I did was, because I was having problems with my printer, and I literally had to threaten legal action for the guy to release it. But supposedly 1,000 of them are going to show up here. So on my website, I had to put sold out. But I'm, you know, once they get here, I'll take that off, and I'll be sure that the three of you certainly get a copy of it.
Fantastic. I'm going to close because I know everybody's crazy busy, but again, I'm going to send out an invite for next Monday to talk about how to frame this discussion for something that we can all participate in for Black History Month, because that's my goal, is to try to make sure that we have something that we can actually look at the destination of it on a date but work backwards with helping some students who
Hey,
will work.
when you get through, Kevin, I'm actually on the road, but I was able to listen in, and I want to chime in because one of the things I told Dr. Mack we do is one of the goals is there's a movement, and I tell you from a personal standpoint, I want to use the information as the start of a movement for Freedom and Equality Day.
Yes.
And that day you have multiple things that can happen, but the drum beat starts in Black History Month. The drum beat starts, but the day we're pushing for is December 6th. His information feeds that narrative. His information is actually the impetus for the narrative. And so we ought to try to leverage that piece. And so the question then becomes not just what. So the what is sometime early February, we're going to do something. The how is with students that are from you all's venue that can go ahead and lead, produce, get in front of, and begin to tell our story, not his story, but our story.
Yeah.
And so we get folks to start doing that piece, and the content is right there. And I think there's two pieces that you all can do in Los Angeles, is you can also have, even though it's a Zoom, primarily a Zoom function, if you can gather in a socially conscious way with 5, 10 people at a location to basically act as a host, and then we begin the drum beat from that point. That's what I think we need to, that's what I think we can do, need to do. And then, and I'll be honest, the droplets are the books. Those are the rain droplets. And then we get a deluge if we get enough people not just having them, but talking about them. And then we rotate this discussion across the country so that we can also get it in the classrooms as part of their discussions of history, very focused in the same sense that we do Western civilization, Far East history, and those other components that make up world history. That's the way I'm thinking.
And General Bray, let me just add this quickly. I'm far more interested in December 6th becoming a Black Freedom Day for us. And the reason I am is, when you think about it, in 1926, when Dr. Woodson started the first Black History Month, he started it in 1926. He chose the second week in February in honor of two men, Lincoln and Douglass, because Lincoln was born on the 12th, Frederick Douglass says the 14th. So he chose that second week in February. But that one effort from him has now become a legacy of a month-long celebration. The idea that Black folks can choose, that we can choose our day as that day of freedom, and then surround it with Black economics, is going to empower what you all as filmmakers are doing, because now we're pushing the envelope to say Black economics is important, Black freedom is important. So that probably means far more to me than anything in this whole effort right now. So, General Bray, again, I certainly thank you for the opportunity to talk about it, but I hope it's something that we can push. This small group can begin to push that drumbeat to say, this is why that day is important to us. We claim it. America didn't have any hesitation of claiming the 4th of July. The fact that was the day that slavery ended in this country for us, I think it's something that we can begin to push.
And historically, some folks are going to play around with dates. They're going to talk about, well, the 18th, but listen to what Carl articulates, which is the day it's ratified. Once the 3/5, and unlike we do today, where it's all done with a vote at one time, this was another movement that took place.
Yeah.
Wow. So General Bray, can you help us by, is there a document or a treatment about December 6th, Black Freedom Day, that exists, or do we make it up? Or
no, there's no making it up. It
well,
exists,
something we can share.
And just go to December 6th on his calendar. He'll give you some of it. The other part you really got to do to give it legs, though. All you need to, well, you know what? There's a way to do it. How many of you all have seen the movie Lincoln?
No, but to the point though, General, what I'll do is
Yeah.
I'll make a PDF of that page and,
Okay.
and I'll send it to you, General Bray, or Mr. Clark, I think I have your email address on there. I'll send a PDF of December 6th, and then you could disseminate it as you see fit.
I want to frame it a little bit, because I want to frame it in the form of a start of a movement as opposed to just information. So send it to me, and I'll CC you back how I'm framing it.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Well, great. And maybe that's where we start with our meeting Monday, is how to bring that to life. That
Yeah,
one page.
I would love to hear Disney, his thoughts on this too. And Jeff, I would love to hear your thoughts on this piece. And by the way, if you could talk to your Disney friends, tell them that I can buy all the Anna PJs I want. I can get all of the PJs for unicorns I want. I can get my daughter, I buy her the Barbie every year, the African American Barbie every year. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed or not, but they get sold out fastest. They're always sold out by the time Christmas comes around. You can find others, but I cannot find PJs for her favorite movie, which is Princess and the Frog. So I just add that to you. So to your kit bag of thought, I can get Anna, I can get Elsa, I can't get a girl from off of Princess. I'm forgetting her name. I feel bad. Help me out. What's her name, man?
Now you got me lying. The original name is Patty, and it moved.
No.
Okay,
Look here.
yeah.
I literally watch that movie at least once a week. At least once a week, I'm watching that movie. And look here, I can talk about the frog, the alligator, even the star, even the star that's up there in the sky, Miss Jocelyn. But I'm forgetting my girl's name. So anyhow, I need
Princess
her.
Tiana. Princess Tiana. Is the name.
Tiana, there you go. In fact, Tiana's Place is what I should have remembered, because she shows her name on that sheet of paper every time.
Wow. And again, for the folks who couldn't make the phone call, for Keisha Washington and Andrea Berry, and several other folks who were invited, I'm going to ask Dr. Carl to take us out. Is there anything that you wish to share with us about the movement, the calendar, and anything else you can to frame Black History Month for 2021?
No, hey man, I'll follow you guys' lead on it. I'm a workhorse at delivering the information. And so just the little bit that I shared with you all then, it's just so, I call it Black History 101. So if folks want to sit down and get some understanding of today's events from yesterday's perspective, you tell me what you want, I'm there. But I think that the movement, I love the idea of, again, just because you hear so much, how many articles have we read about the spending power of Black folks? So just imagine if on Black Economic Day, which historically Black Freedom Day, which historically makes sense, we just say on that day, every penny is going to some Black owned business. If you need gas, get gas on December 5th. Don't buy it on December 6th. Every penny you spend on that day is with Black owned businesses. Just the concept alone just warms my heart. So that's what I love to see happen. And I think we can. Because again, the more, I can't tell you that even when I delivered, being from Mississippi and fighting against that Confederate flag, the moment I dropped knowledge about the Vice President of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens, speaking about the Cornerstone speech, everybody steps back. You start asking folks, what day was the 13th Amendment ratified? We don't know. All we know is slavery ended. Why not put the significance? Because look what America did when they wrote that Declaration of Independence. They signed it on July 4th. That became Independence Day. Hadn't won the battle, hadn't won the Revolutionary War, but the day that they declared freedom, that's the day it became a day of freedom. But the day them shackles came away from our ankles and that yoke came from our neck, if we make that our Freedom Day, just imagine what can happen to Black-owned businesses. Because believe me, just like white folks now celebrate Black history, white folks gonna join in and start spending money with Black-owned businesses as well. Believe me. And it can start right here.
Okay, well, again, thank you, Dr. Crowell, General Bray, Dee, Jeff, and Lou for joining us. And again, this is just the beginning. So stay tuned. And again, everybody have a great weekend.
Brother Clark,
Very
I'm gonna
good.
thank you December 6th.
December 6th.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll remember that.
Brothers, a
Merry
pleasure.
Christmas. Merry Christmas,
Very cool.
everybody. Y'all
Thanks,
be good.
Happy holidays.
Good notes.
Take care.
Okay.
Happy holidays. Okay, bye.